a biotechnology company. We're entirely a therapeutics-focused company. We focus on an area of the immune system called innate immunity. And innate immunity can be thought of as really the first responders of the immune response. Typically, it's the component of the immune system that presents itself in a few hours after infection or vaccination. And we apply the work that we do there primarily in the immuno-oncology space to try to understand why tumors are not well recognized by the immune system, and also in the neuroscience and neuropathic inflammation space to try to understand how to control inflammation better in individuals who have nerve injury. I'll mostly talk today about our lead asset, which is a monoclonal antibody for advanced solid tumor called KVA-12.1. And this is targeting a new drug target called VISTA. And VISTA is a very important drug target in tumor. It's a very important target that really blocks the ability of the immune system to recognize the tumor as foreign and create inflammation in the tumor, which is the key for immunological control of the tumor. And this particular drug we're bringing into the clinic later this year or early in 2022. In addition to that, we have done some work in the inflammation space. As part of our business model, we have done a number of partnering transactions for drugs with major pharmaceutical companies. One of those partnering transactions I'll talk about is a deal we did with Genentech Roche around a chronic neuropathic pain drug that's currently in clinical development in Europe. So these are our two markets. Immuno-oncology and neuropathic pain are two very large active pharmaceutical development markets. Immuno-oncology in particular is one of the largest globally. It's about an $88 billion market. It's also one of the most fastest growing markets. And aside from the growth in pricing and drug acceptance and drug use there, commercial growth, it's probably the largest market for new biotech IPOs. And also for new investment and M&A transactions and licensing deals. Typically in each of those instances, about half of all of the deals that are getting done are in the IO space. So it's a very attractive commercial space for our company. And the reason it is because it's a big public health problem. So cancer is a major public health problem globally, and in particular in the US, where these figures are reflected here. There are about almost 2 million newly diagnosed cases of cancer, and they're in all the common areas which you would recognize: prostate, breast, and lung and colorectal cancer are the most common. And these are some of the most difficult to treat. So while we've made some significant progress in developing new therapies for breast, really prostate, lung, and colorectal, we haven't seen as much innovation. Those remain, major commercial opportunities for new drug development in cancer. Cancer is also a big killer in the United States. It's actually the second most frequent cause of death after cardiovascular disease. And one of the things that we tend to see because of this is strong pricing power in the cancer space. So we see for new therapies in oncology, typically we have 2 to 3-fold greater pricing power than a new therapy in another therapeutic indication. So there's a lot to like about the commercial opportunity in cancer. And that's one of the reasons why we focus our development around novel drugs and drug targets in the cancer space. So today I'm going to talk about, something that's maybe a little bit more technical. We refer to it as the tumor microenvironment. Really what it is trying to get an understanding of why some tumors can be more readily recognized by the immune system than others. And we tend to call those hotter or more inflamed tumors versus colder or more uninflamed tumors. And we really want to understand and exploit drug targets that help the immune system to recognize those colder tumors, to reprogram that immune response to fight those colder tumors. And so that is kind of our key therapeutic focus. And it's a key push in the field over the last 5 years or so. The landscape in oncology treatment has really changed a lot. Conventionally, for new cancer diagnoses, there was surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And when you had a newly diagnosed, relatively early stage tumor, those conventional therapies were successful, have historically been successful, and still are successful in achieving a curative intent with those patients, so achieving long-term overall survival or a complete cure of the cancer. One of the areas where we haven't done as well as in for patients who are diagnosed with a relatively advanced tumor. And unfortunately, certain types of tumors are more commonly diagnosed only as advanced tumors. So some examples of that would be lung or pancreatic, where most of those patients really present with a locally advanced or metastatic tumor at initial diagnosis. And for those patients, the conventional trifecta hasn't been very successful. So the field has really looked to alternatives there in terms of targeted therapies and also immune therapies. And in those immune therapies, in those first generation immune therapies, we have had some success in very advanced cancer patients in getting complete responses in those patients and profound improvements in long-term survival. But those individuals who are successful are really a minority of the patients who are treated. And so understanding why that is kind of a key focus of our company. And so we're very focused on this phenomenon of a colder tumor. A colder tumor we consider to be an immunologically silent tumor, a tumor which is resistant to recognition by the immune system. These tumors typically have a lot of immune cells in them, these colder tumors, but those immune cells are programming that tumor toward a more immunosuppressive phenotype. And so rather than the immune system really being a helpful component in the tumor in driving inflammation and recognition by the immune system, the opposite is happening in these colder tumors. We have a lot of in-migrating immune cells that actually are immunosuppressive. And so that correlates with poor overall patient survival and poor response to a whole variety of therapies. We think that VISTA is a very important target or determinant in why those colder tumors are cold. We think VISTA is an important protein in these tumors that is programming them toward a colder phenotype. And by blocking VISTA, we can transition them to a more inflamed or hotter phenotype. So we are developing a product which specifically blocks VISTA and causes this transition from colder to hotter tumor. And just a little bit of data on that. These are a couple of examples of tumor models in mice for our lead candidate, which is going into the clinic later this year. In the left-hand panel, we're looking at melanoma, which is a colder tumor. It tends to be characterized by a number of those immunosuppressive immune cells, those counterproductive immune cells. And here, we're treating just with as a single agent with our anti-VISTA antibody and measuring tumor growth. And you can see that that anti-VISTA drug actually results in tumor growth inhibition of more than 50% just as a single agent. And of course, everything in cancer is combination therapy. So in addition to having this target and this drug have really attractive effects in these cold tumors as a single agent, when we combine it with other established therapies, which is really being shown in this right panel for colon carcinoma, we see additive or synergistic effects. So we think this drug is really well positioned to treat some of these more difficult to treat tumors where there hasn't been significant innovation over the past 10 years or so. When we think about the market opportunity here, it is a very large market opportunity. This slide really lays out the assumptions that we make about the market when we do our pricing and valuation models. Because this is a targeted immunotherapy, we will be going into patient populations that have relatively advanced cancers. And these are typically individuals who have failed first or second line established treatments. So our model is really built around colorectal, lung, ovarian, pancreatic, and prostate, and lung is the biggest commercial opportunity there. And we actually model out the US, Europe, and Japan as kind of the largest unit of market globally. That's somewhere between 92 and 95% of the global pharmaceutical sales market. And that is really our focus as we think about initial commercial introduction of these agents. And then finally, pricing. One of the things that I mentioned that's attractive about the IO space is pricing power. For IO products, we typically have very strong pricing power. The best-selling IO product in the US, Keytruda, which is a Merck product, sells at an average wholesale price of about $10,000 a month, so $120,000 a year, which is very strong pricing. And so we're able to model very strong pricing in the US, and then slightly less strong pricing, but still very good in the EU and Europe. We intend to bring this drug into initial commercial clinical indications in 2029 or 2030. So that's when you see revenue beginning to appear in Kineta's bottom line around this anti-VISTA targeted therapy. And a couple of things that I think you can see from this graph when you look at year-over-year revenue growth is that even in a total addressable market of only 500,000 patients in those three major commercial markets, this drives really strong revenue for the company. This would be a multi-billion-dollar drug by the 2030s. And a lot of that share is coming from non-small cell lung cancer and colorectal cancer, which are the two most frequent treatable diseases in this space. The other thing I think that's really interesting about biotech in particular is these are all patented medicines. So we invest a lot in our intellectual property portfolio, and our patent estate here will be a global patent estate, and we would expect it to stretch through at least 2041 in most of the major commercial markets. So that would protect us from generic competition and allow us to keep pricing high for this particular product, and that's why it's such a profitable product for our company. Now, in addition to our work in IO, we do frequently do partner programs, especially if they're in a commercial or clinical space that's a little bit more challenging for Kineta. Pain is a challenging commercial space globally, mostly because of the dominance of generic opioids in the pain space. Just looking at the United States specifically, we have really an epidemic problem of the overuse of prescription opioids in the US. And that has been driven by the introduction of more powerful opioids like OxyContin and generic forms of OxyContin. And this has really driven an epidemic of addiction and accidental overdose of prescription opioids. So there's a strong desire to develop novel therapies to treat chronic pain. Most people who have chronic pain are actually chronic opioid users. For example, in chronic lower back pain, about 40% of those patients are still chronically using opioids. They don't have good alternative therapeutic options. And so it's a very attractive commercial space. But from the perspective of what other companies are doing in this space, there are very few companies that are really active in the pain space. So development in this area can be a little bit of a challenge. Kineta's drug, KCP506, is currently in the clinic in Europe. So it's being evaluated in clinical trials in Europe. It's a very highly differentiated drug. Again, it targets a novel drug target, which is a type of receptor which is expressed in the peripheral nervous system, and it's also expressed in the innate immune system. And this particular receptor is involved in pain experience, pain nociception, but it's also involved in inflammation. So when you block this channel in nerve injury models, you relieve pain, but you also have reductions in inflammation around injured nerves. And so over time, these injuries are less likely to evolve from an acute situation into a chronic pain situation. And it is a non-opioid. It doesn't enter the central nervous system. It has none of those centrally mediated effects that we see with opioids. Kineta actually elected to partner around the pain space because it is a more challenging commercial space for our company. We had a number of companies who were interested in working with Kineta around this particular drug. Ultimately, we decided to ink a deal with Genentech. Genentech is a very innovative company, has a reputation for bringing really novel drugs into the commercial space and making them a commercial success. We did a deal in 2018, which is a collaboration option and license agreement with Genentech. Kineta controls the development of this pain drug through phase 1. And after the end of phase 1, Genentech has an option right to take over control of the product. And under this transaction, we're eligible to receive almost $360 million in milestone payments. We've received so far under the collaboration $21 million in milestone payments, and we're eligible to receive up to double-digit royalties. So we think in this deal, we were able to capture about a third of the net present value of the asset, and this could also drive about $3 billion in cumulative revenue into Kineta over the life of the Genentech pain patents. I talked about my experience here. A lot of the technical team has been working with me for a long time, both at Kineta and at my previous company. And so we're happy to have working together for a long period of time, and we really built out our team to prepare Kineta for a potential exit in the next 18 months or so. So we've been really focused on enriching our team in ways that can help to drive that exit. In addition to that, we're supported by a really prominent group of scientific advisors, mostly in the oncology space, because that's our major focus, from really some of the best known institutions globally. And these are all really experts in immuno-oncology, drug discovery and development, and they each serve a particular purpose or have a particular experience which is valuable to the company. So when we think about exits for Kineta, one of the things that we talked a little bit about on the panel was what was happening in the capital markets in biotech. This is mostly a snapshot of the United States and Europe. And as you can see, this is new investments in public biotech companies over the past 8 years or so. And 2020 was the strongest year ever. For new biotech IPOs. It was actually also the strongest year for follow-ons or private placements in public biotechs. Quite a bit of money has been raised, and the IPO window has been open to a number of companies, and most of these companies have been very successful in their IPO. And currently in the US, we expect 2021 to be a similarly strong year, and the fourth quarter is looking to be consistent with those expectations. When we look at one of the key things I think that's changed over the last 5 years in the biotech IPO space is the shift toward companies that have products in earlier development. So historically, in order to take a biotech company IPO, you had to have a commercial product or be very near to commercial development, say for example, phase 3 clinical trials. So largely have de-risked that initial commercial product. And we've seen this evolution toward earlier and earlier IPOs in the space, so that last year, half of the IPOs that were done in the US were preclinical or phase 1 assets. And this is really reflecting investor demand in platform technologies, and also investor demand for making risk capital investments around earlier binary events in the drug development cycle. So we see valuations for these earlier IPOs as being very strong and increasing. And we think this presents an opportunity for a potential exit for Kineta in 2021 or 2022. And then finally, just looking at that class of 2020 IPOs through about late September, we do see that they have performed very well with an average return to date of over 50%. And that's really been driven by these companies doing, in general, very strong crossover rounds. So putting together groups of crossover investors who invest in the last private round and then support the company through IPO and tend to take longer positions in the company. And that has really been supporting the overall performance of these companies over the past several years. So as we think about potential exits for Kineta, we've talked about our different drug development programs in the oncology and neuropathic pain space. We think our company has pretty good news flow over the next 3 years. We have a number of drugs that are in the clinic or that are entering the clinic over the next 18 months. I think the valuation of our company and the interest in our company is primarily being driven by our IO assets. But we've also been able to show that we're able to do major M&A transactions and licensing transactions as a team. And this does drive some of the value of the company. And it also provides alternative exits for us if the IPO market window closes over the next 2 years. And then just finally, I would say that currently Kineta is raising a private round of investment. I know this is more of an investor-focused conference, so I did want to close by saying that we do have currently open a private round of investment, which is a $10 million round. We anticipate closing this round around the end of April. There's been good investor interest in this particular round, and so that is our anticipated close. And the funding or use of proceeds there are really focused on our VISTA program. The other programs in our portfolio are funded, for example, through the Genentech collaboration. So we are really focused on raising financing to finance that VISTA IO program. And so with that, I'll just show you some contact information for our team. Some of my colleagues are here at the forum with me, Craig Phillips and Gary Genchis and myself. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about the company, the platform here at the investor conference does have ways to reach out to us. And here's some contact information for our team. So with that, I'll turn it back to the moderator. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'd be happy to take any questions if we have them.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, we have a couple of questions which have come in. The first is, so what types of cancer will your anti-VISTA drug treat? And how specific is the Kineta-VISTA antibody to the targets?
Yeah, so our initial, some of the initial focus for us is around lung cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, gastrointestinal, colon carcinoma, and ovarian and cervical cancer. Those are some key initial focuses for us, and probably some of the initial labeled indications will be in those areas. In terms of specificity, the drug has been really intensively studied for its specificity and selectivity. It's also actually been evaluated in tolerability and toxicology studies in primates, which are the best model really for humans. And so far, we don't see any toxicology concerns. So we're pretty excited about where we are in terms of the development of that particular product.
And is an IPO the most likely path to liquidity for your investors? And will Kineta's IPO be based on any specific milestones achieved?
Yeah, so we would like to IPO around the time that we're entering the clinic with our anti-VISTA product. We think there will be investor interest in investing at around the initial clinical readouts for that product. And we think the biotech window will remain open so that Kineta can participate in that. Alternative exits are very common in biotech. M&A is the best alternative exit for us, an acquisition. I sold my previous company in an acquisition to Cubist, which is now part of Merck. So that's something that we have experience with, and those exits can be equally attractive with an IPO.
Great. We have time for one final question. Is the current raise the last private round for Kineta prior to a liquidity event?
So we anticipate that we will do a crossover round. As I mentioned, when I was looking at the market conditions, the IPOs in 2020 that have performed the best had very strong crossover investor participation. And I think that's a key for us, is to do a crossover round to bring investors in the company who are going to be long investors post-IPO. So that's a focus of ours now, and there probably will be one additional round pre-IPO.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, really insightful. Yeah, thanks very much for sharing what you're doing and the important work that Kineta is doing. And as Sean said to all of the participants watching, please feel free to reach out to Sean or his team, Gary, and you can do that on the application, the forum web portal. Alternatively, the recording of this presentation will be available through the web app, and on the slide you'll see their email addresses as well. Thanks again, Sean, and we'll speak soon.
Okay, thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. And to all the participants, we've got a panel coming up shortly on cannabis investment. Hope to see you there. Thank you.